figured this one would be easy. I mean, I've watched Arcane, so I know Vi. Except, do I? This week we're going to explore Vi, the Piltover Enforcer. Hi there, welcome to Runeterra Tourist. I'm Patrick. I don't know anything about these people, so let's learn about them together. So Vi was one of the characters that I thought was going to be easy. I mean, I'd watched Arcane, I was very familiar with the storyline, so I figured this was going to be a pretty easy walk in the park, and, you know, especially considering she's the lead, I should know the story by now, except that is not what I discovered. Vi was already pretty well liked in League of Legends. She wasn't anybody who was too offensive, pretty solid legend, but didn't seem to really stick around until Arcane came and boosted her credibility. And so after Haley Steinfeld's performance, it made people care about her a little bit more than the lore ever quite managed to do. So it's been determined that Arcane is canon, which makes it interesting considering her lore doesn't quite line up based off of how she was portrayed in League of Legends and how her cards are shown in Riftbound. So thinking that this was going to be pretty easy to gloss over a lot of the stuff and just go right into the cards, I had actually a lot of work cut out for me. So let's take a look at how she was being portrayed before Arcane and how she's portrayed in her cards in Riftbound. Vi was born in the Undercity of Zaun with the very generic background of having been orphaned, not knowing who her parents were or how she arrived where she did. She ended up running with street gangs as she grew up and learning how to survive through wits and fists. And the name Vi comes from the tattoo that's on her cheek, because for the longest time she didn't know where she came from, and it could be mistaken for a Roman numeral 5 if I guess Romans were in Noxus, or I don't know how that works, but for years she didn't know what her real name was. In the original lore, it's told that she had planned this heist with an untrustworthy crew and a mining facility, and of course, as things go, it went awry, and so she ended up choosing to save these trapped workers, and that's where she gained these gauntlets from. So she found the damaged robotic mining rig, ripped off its massive fists on the spot, and modified them into makeshift Hextech gauntlets. So this is an interesting detail because rather than receiving the Hextech gauntlets, she crafts them herself. She is resourceful, showing her cunning and her ability to use the tools that are around her rather than being handed such a magnificent weapon or makeshift weapon, which is an interesting detail that they kind of forego in Arcane. Something ends up happening in a botched heist where it's presumed that she is dead, but ultimately we find out that she is now paired with Caitlyn and is a Piltover Enforcer. And there's a relationship that she has with Caitlyn that's been hinted at over the years and confirmed more when we watch Arcane. And speaking of things that got confirmed with Arcane, it was alluded to numerous times about the possibility of Vi having a sister and Jinx having a sister, but they never really confirmed it. They also kind of played off of the tattoo as being part of maybe she was in this experiment that went awry. That's how she developed this extra strength to be able to handle the gauntlets at the, down the line. And same thing with Jinx. They kind of were theorizing about it through fandom, saying that there's clearly this connection here. Riot had been planting enough breadcrumbs. The Jinx line, you think I'm crazy, you should see my sister, but they never really committed until Arcane happened. There's apparently even a little cutscene where a shopkeeper had the voice saying, "You look like your sister." Oh wait, we're not supposed to talk about that. Like, they alluded to it a lot, or a lot of winks, and eventually it did get confirmed. Getting back to the gauntlets for a moment, it's kind of an interesting detail here because the design origin comes from Paul Kwan, one of the Riot artists there, drawing Vi with these oversized gloves as a visual choice. August Browning built her entire gameplay around it too. And it's purely based off of just a headshot of this punk rock looking chick with these goggles and a lollipop, which mercifully kind of doesn't make it into more of her skins and everything like that. So why the fists? Every weapon in Piltover and Zaun has this class dimension. And so, Caitlyn has the Hextech rifle that's built by her wealthy parents. Jinx comes up with her own weapons built off of scraps. So Vi fights with her hands, and this was an interesting mechanic that having her have these oversized hands just seemed really amplified. It really created this dynamic that showed that she could be way more powerful than her initial appearance. But they kind of steal that in Arcane. She's gifted these gauntlets, they're called Atlas gauntlets, by Jace and Victor. So these are tools to help miners with these deep fissures, and Jace arms Vi with them directly. So now we're foregoing her resourcefulness, and she's gifted these gauntlets. So Arcane establishes that Vi's real name is Violet, and her parents were killed by enforcers during an uprising. So that's why she's always kind of been put off by the enforcers, even though, spoiler alert, she ends up becoming one. Vander adopted her and Powder, which becomes Jinx, and the imprisonment of Stillwater Hold is where she got her tattoos, including the Vi on her cheek. And Arcane is now officially canon, which was confirmed in 2023, but the inconsistencies are a little bit peculiar and apparently just going to be addressed over time, which I guess we're waiting on at this point. I think the real shift is in the personality, because Vi in League of Legends seems to be really snarky, witty, quippy, cocky if you want, but this wisecracking, punch first, ask questions while punching type of character. And Arcane, she's a little bit more raw, and so she's brooding, carrying this grief about her trauma. So they remove a little bit of the hot-headedness. I mean, she's still kind of hot-headed in Arcane, but a little bit different. Initially, when I was reading her original backstory, I kind of viewed it more as this Robin Hood-like character where she would be stealing from those who can afford it and giving back to her community in Zaun. I guess that's not necessarily fair. She does have her Undercity roots, but she's kind of caught in between two worlds where she wants to be this doer of good, but she also comes from the Undercity and it's all she knows. So it's a little tricky to see how that got transformed into what she became in Arcane, all things considered. Taking a look at her cards, it's pretty evident that Riot used the League of Legends version of Vi more so than the Arcane version, even though there's a lot of art spillover between the two. And she has her original card in Origins, which we'll go over first, before seeing how she appears in Unleashed. Starting with her champion unit from Origins, Vi Destructive. She has ganking, which allows her to move from battlefield to battlefield, and when you recycle one card from your trash, you can increase her might by 1. So this effectively translates to her ability to charge across the map in League of Legends, the assault and battery that locks onto a target, and then she just charges through everything in her way, basically. And the trash recycling mechanic's interesting. I'm viewing it more like from her ability to be resourceful in the Undercity of Zaun, where she had to scrap together whatever she could to make use of it. And I guess that's kind of how we would take this and flavor it. It works a little bit, but it's you can tell in set 1 they were just trying to get their legs underneath them and create this game first. Moving on to her legend in Unleashed, Vi Piltover Enforcer. When you conquer, if you assign 3 or more excess damage, you may exhaust me to ready a unit. So this goes back to her hot-headedness from her League of Legends lore, where it's about excessive damage that she's done. There's a story in the website that talks about her as she's a Piltover Enforcer, where she encounters somebody where they refuse to give up any information to the cops, so to speak, and actually when they see Vi, they make the comment about how surprised they are to still see her, and then she proceeds to beat them up a little bit to try to get the information out. So with that in mind, I feel like this really touches on that type of persona, the hot-headedness, the whole punching first, ask questions while punching thing. And so I think that they really took it to the extremes here of making sure that excess damage is what triggers the reward. You have people like Master Yi about defending alone in set 1, and I think this one captures her personality a little bit better. The Hex Tech gauntlets are her signature gear, and you can see that it has a pretty expensive cost, 3 energy, equip 3 energy, and a power. The ability's energy cost is reduced by the might of the unit you choose, and you'll note that a lot of her champion units are 3 might or above. So she'll be able to easily put these onto her. But also it has when I conquer, if you assign 3 or more excess damage, draw 1, tying right into her legend ability. So interesting note here, Hex Tech gauntlets are what they're called, not the Atlas gauntlets that they're called in Arcane, even though that's canon, right? But this just proves more that they are focusing on the League of Legends lore rather than Arcane when they come up with these card designs. And so this is an interesting one. Once again, feeding off of the excess damage that she does and rewarding you for it, which is not necessarily a mechanic in Riftbound per se. Doesn't really help you with conquering, doesn't really help you with holding as much as it just rewards you for doing more, which I guess is kind of Vi's thing. Her champion unit in order is Vi Peacekeeper, which I guess is a dry joke on the fact that she keeps the peace while excessive violence or whatever. But in here she has Ambush, which allows you to play her as a reaction to a battlefield where you have units already, and when I attack, stun an enemy unit here, which means that it doesn't do any damage back to you. And so this is an interesting one, given that this is kind of like denting blows from what I understand in League of Legends, the ability that reduces the armor and eventually stuns the opponent. So I guess it kind of works flavor wise in League of Legends per se, and now that she's the enforcer, kind of fits that aspect of her being able to appear at a moment's notice to stop whatever is happening. In this case, if somebody is attacking you, she'll be able to help defend. Moving on to her champion unit, Vi Hot-Headed in Fury, you can see that it's a 4 energy, 3 might unit that has deflect, making her pretty difficult to select which spells, and it has a 2 energy, 1 power cost to double my might this turn. And note, you can spend that multiple times, so you can double it exponentially depending on how much you can spend. And so this is an interesting one because the might doubling is kind of harder to map in League of Legends. I didn't really notice anything that mapped to that ability, and so it kind of reads more of like a generalized, she inflicts a lot of damage at a moment's notice kind of thing. So not really a good flavor hit as far as I'm concerned with it. This is very much more just almost a generic ability that you could put on almost any League of Legends character and that's porting over to Riftbound here. It will help her in the mechanics of Riftbound with Vi, but I mean, as far as flavor goes, it's a little unrelatable. I guess the hot-headed aspect of the angrier she gets, the more runes you're spending, then the more... it's an interesting one. This was kind of touch and go for me. It's worth noting that there's a notable miss with the excessive force. I guess that's her E ability in League of Legends, and they kind of touched on that with her legend ability, but it's a punch that blasts through a target to damage the enemies behind it. And there's really not much that resembles that in Riftbound. They could have done something where if she deals an excessive amount of damage, that extra damage could go on to other enemies, something to that effect. But I guess really the +3 damage is the closest that they get to it. I just felt like that was a little bit of a miss. The other item I find interesting is that there is a card from Spirit Forged which is called Punch First, and notably it's not in either of Vi's colors. It's actually in the body category there, and so I find it interesting, the ability that it grants you a +5 might to a unit. That might have made it a little too easy for Vi to achieve her legend ability, so I can see why they didn't want those two together, but I mean, it's pretty clear that the person in there has these Hextech gauntlets and conveniently short hair cut there too. So I don't know, this was an interesting thing to have that ability and just put Vi's picture on it. I mean, this isn't the first time they've done stuff like that. There's Fiora on another card art in colors that she's not a part of, etc. So I guess it's not too out of the blue, but it is an interesting note, I thought. So I thought this one would be pretty easy to cover, given that I've already seen Arcane and figured that the lore would be somewhat close, but kind of doesn't even really scratch the surface on what they had her be before in League of Legends. I kind of felt like they took a concept and then refined it a little bit more because they really wanted to touch on the Vi and Jinx dynamic and them being sisters. That was, I guess, the bigger reveal. But it's interesting that they went from this snarky, arrogant, punch first kind of character to then somebody who's a little bit more brooding and serious in Arcane. And so it was an interesting twist that they did to her storyline, and also the fact that they kind of said, yep, both are acceptable, which feels like a little bit of a cop-out. Card-wise, there really wasn't much that tied her League of Legends character and lore into her abilities in Riftbound. I mean, I think the Legend ability is probably the closest that we get there, and obviously the Hextech Gauntlets being the signature spell makes sense, but there didn't really seem to be anything as far as her abilities in the game that ported over to the card game. And so it's a little disappointing in that sense, but I mean, I guess it was really difficult on how to be able to turn those mechanics into something, into this card game that doesn't necessarily reward you for that kind of gameplay yet. Overall, with Riot choosing the League of Legends lore over Arcane makes a lot of sense, just given the fact that so many of the other legends are following suit. But I figured with the popularity of Arcane and the fact that they've literally released cards with the Arcane art to the public during pre-releases and stuff, they would probably focus a little bit more on tying the two together, maybe coming up with some lore to try to help figure all that stuff out and make it make sense. But from what I've learned in researching other legends, it's not exactly Riot's MO. So how did I do? What did I miss? And for the League of Legends players, how do you think her mechanics ported over into Riftbound? And for the Arcane followers, such as myself, what did you think about how she is being portrayed in this card game? Do you notice anything interesting about her mechanics? Leave a comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'd be really curious to find out a little bit more if there's anything that you'd like to share in that capacity. But until next time, thanks for watching.